Hello and welcome to Off My Bridge! My name is Guy, and today we're looking at the different eras of Star Trek and why they make a difference to the kinds of games that we're going to be running, and how best to utilize each era depending on whether you're playing with a new group, an old group, an experienced group, an inexperienced group, or just a bunch of friends who gather around the table to maybe try their hand at playing Star Trek. The different eras help us to do this. Well, how do they do it? Well, that's what we're talking about in today's video. So let's start right at the beginning with Enterprise. So Enterprise as an era is the earliest that you kind of get with still a Star Trek feel. And even then, it's only very surface level Star Trek stuff. Things haven't yet been invented. Prime directives. A lot of the technology doesn't exist. A lot of the starship technology that the players will have access to is very limited, very dumbed down. It's really rough and tumble kind of space exploration. So what does it mean for us as game masters if we're running a game in the Enterprise era? Well, firstly, all the rules are out the window. We don't have to worry about prime directives. We don't have to worry about first contact protocols. We don't have to worry about the captain not leaving the bridge. All of that kind of stuff doesn't exist yet. So it's a really good era to play in if you have a bunch of folks who are not too familiar with how Star Trek works, who don't know a huge amount of information about all of the different species that are out there, because Enterprise didn't know all of the species that were out there. Every contact is almost a first contact. Yeah, the Klingons are around and they're kind of bad guys, but that's about it. Everything else is brand new. The technology is pretty much what we have access today. Transporters were slowly starting to come in, but otherwise it was shuttles and running around and basically using what we have today, which I think is one of the reasons why it didn't work so well. But anyway, that's a different story. The crew are very familiar with each other. It's much more like a warship during World War II than it is anything else. And so that familiarity is there. It also means that you can create anything you like, any new species. Everything is going to be fun. It's going to be fresh. It's going to be exciting. Combat should be against the player characters, however, as they learn that most species out there have better technology than they do. And that's part of kind of the feel, is that it's exploring this new world and adding stuff. So I would look at having their ship being upgraded on a constant basis as they encounter different species and learn different technologies and make good choices diplomatically. Their ship should also be growing and upgrading and expanding. So Enterprise, I find, is a pretty good era for non-Star Trek players to be able to play in a Star Trek kind of game. We now enter into the murky territory of the original series / Strange New Worlds, which at the time of this video is the most current of the series out there. They are almost so different to one another that we can't compare them, at least on the surface. Strange New Worlds is slick, it's arrogant in terms of the characters believe that they are almost capable of doing anything and everything. Pike has this attitude of we will prevail, which admittedly Kirk does as well. But there's a certain humility that Kirk and the original series had, which I don't feel Strange New Worlds has. Anything is doable, everything is achievable, and yes, the characters certainly show a certain amount of nervousness and reluctance and a sense that they don't know what they're doing. But there is that brashness that this era has, the sense that the Federation exists, it's this powerful force, and that it is a force for good. There is a lot of tumultuous information happening at this point. We still have transporters, that's fine, but we don't have any of the more modern kind of stuff, the holodecks, those kind of more fancy devices. However, we do have this very new kind of Federation to explore. There is still cool stuff going on, and if you enjoy playing truly quirky, crazy games where giant hands can manifest or musicals can suddenly happen, then Strange New Worlds, the original series, is definitely an era to look at playing in. This is not the super serious Star Trek. This is, hey, let's go have fun with a universe full of crazy and wonderful stuff. Unlike Enterprise, which to me is very gritty in terms of it's a little ship all on its own exploring the galaxy. Here you've got a giant fleet, Starfleet is around, you've got a lot of protocols starting to come in, but it's also still about having a lot of fun. So Strange New Worlds, the original series, I think really lends itself to a group of casual players who are like, yeah, we're gonna talk to a rock this season because, you know, why not? Rocks are cool. Let's look at some rocks. So that's what Strange New Worlds in the original series does for me. Now, it is important to differentiate for your players, especially players who are experienced with Star Trek, to say, well, this is more Strange New Worlds style. We're super slick, we're super about exploring the right kind of moral choices, and we generally like favorable outcomes. As opposed to the original series, where we're exploring deep and dark moral issues, and we don't necessarily have the right answer. And we'll show you what happens if the wrong answer is chosen, or we'll make the tough choices that have to be made. That's one of the big differences, I think, anyway, is that the original series was way more willing to say, we're not perfect in the future, and we still have to make tough choices that we can't just magic our way out of. We have to live with them. Some very, very heavy episodes in the original series. Well, we go from an arrogant Starfleet who think they are masters of the universe to a very cautious, diplomatic Starfleet when we catch up with the Next Generation crew. Next Gen was where they said, all of that silliness, we're going to get rid of it for the most part. We might still have one or two episodes where we try to be silly and realize it's a bad idea. So we pull back. And it became quite serious drama. Quite serious investigations into moral and ethical questions, and the outcomes were usually quite seriously chosen. There were some lighthearted episodes. I'm not saying that there weren't episodes where you were laughing out loud, but generally speaking, this was where Starfleet grew up and became an adult. And your enemies are very clear-cut. We know exactly who they are. They're the Romulans and the Borg and the Ferengi on the side occasionally. But that's what this era is about. This era is about diplomatic negotiations. It's about avoiding conflict because there is a lot of loaded potential conflict that could be there. Every engagement with the Romulans is a life or death, galactic, world-ending, universe-ending kind of moment. There is a lot of very careful treading. I would say that the Next Generation is for players who are serious Star Trek fanatics, because the Prime Directive is absolutely sacrosanct. You cannot violate the Prime Directive. You cannot deviate. Starfleet is watching you. JAG is there to conduct investigations into your activities. All of the allies and the enemies, they're watching what you're doing. So this is pristine Star Trek period in terms of making sure that your players are running that fine line and not crossing it as often as they would in, say, Strange New Worlds or the original series, and definitely much more so than in Enterprise, which didn't even have those rules. So Next Gen, I think, is for like the hardcore Star Trek players. And if you want to go even darker and more serious, Deep Space Nine is, I count, as a different era. Although it is running concurrently with Voyager and with Next Generation, Deep Space Nine was a journey into the dark side of the Federation. This is what happens when real war breaks out. Picard and Janeway have always skirted around the edges of it and haven't really delved too deeply into it. Deep Space Nine was like, nope, we are going to show you loss. We are going to show you devastation on a galaxy-spanning scale. And so when you look at it as an era to play in, DS9 had some awful episodes in its early seasons, but it also had some incredibly strong moral decision-making episodes and a lot of intrigue and politics going on. The Klingons are allies. No, they're enemies. Now the Cardassians are enemies. No, they're allies. No, they're enemies again. Now they're allies again. This very dynamic space where we are seeing the politics that the next gen was so carefully trying to preserve. We see that collapse, and we see the resultant chaos that comes out of it. Again, DS9, I would say, is for experienced players who are willing to understand and accept their role within the Federation and within Starfleet, and to have these tough episodes where you're seeing that the founders are ruthless, absolutely ruthless. The Cardassians are as dark as you can get, and yet we are also seeing the other side of them. We're seeing the light side, the family side, the loyal side. So it's a deep exploration into these heavy subjects. And again, I would say Next Gen, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine are all about looking at the character in these very tough situations, and not about the violence. Although DS9 is full of starship combat and battles and death and tragedy, that is not glorified. It's definitely not an action series. This is death that happens, and it is an unfortunate and tragic death because of all of the things that have conspired to cause it to happen. We then skip slightly ahead in time to Lower Decks. Now, Lower Decks, it's a cartoon series, and you're like, but surely this is just chaos and fun. It absolutely is chaos. It absolutely is fun. And I would suspect that Lower Decks is as close to mirroring what actually will be happening in our role-playing game of Star Trek Adventures 2. Much more so than any of the other genres. As much as we might try to be serious, there are moments of brevity that come in, and there are these funny things that we can comment on and look at and poke fun at. But at the same time, Lower Decks also didn't shy away from heavy moral decisions, didn't look too far away from the serious exploration of space. The Starfleet at this point is much more stable, is much more in control. The enemies are at the fringes. Life is good in Starfleet, unlike the dark period that we've just come through of Next Gen and DS9 and Voyager. Lower Decks is about, the Federation is stabilized once again, and we're free to go out and have fun and explore these strange worlds. And obviously it also looked at the support crew, the ships that are not the flagship, that are not the most important ships in the fleet. And so it gives us a very different perspective to be able to add into our games. Now, sometimes your player characters might very well be the flagship crew, the most important people in the galaxy. And Lower Decks is like, or they could just be on a backwards little ship that runs courier missions and does second contacts and mops up after the main stuff has happened. I mean, it's really a lot of fun. Discovery is kind of like a journey all the way back to Enterprise. It's so far in the future that we've got this radically cool technology. Nacelles are held in place by tractor beams and energy fields. We've got instant teleportation across entire sectors of space. The technology is so far advanced it basically is magic. But we also don't have a federation, or at least we have the very beginnings of a new federation. All the old rules are out the window. We don't have to worry about prime directives and things. It is gritty. It is definitely gritty. And there isn't that light-hearted joy and exuberance that Lower Decks has, or that the original series or Strange New Worlds has. This is intense, character-driven stuff. The aliens that we encounter, they're there. Yes, we have the Klingons doing their thing, but it's not the main focus of that era. It is about discovering new technology, new spaces, new creatures, new environments, and going bigger. Discovery had a very large budget, and so could add in weird and wonderful creatures that Voyager and DS9 and Next Gen could only dream about. Discovery was able to really push that envelope and look at scale and what about big giant aliens or little aliens and things like that. So that was something that I think Discovery lets you do as a game master, is to be able to have these really cool gaming sessions where you're really pushing the envelope of what we think of when we think of sci-fi and Star Trek without having to be constrained by Star Trek. So Discovery, much like Enterprise, is quite a useful period for us to play in if we're playing with folks who don't know too much about Star Trek, because most of the species have been interbred and mixed through and all that kind of wonderful stuff. So we're coming up with new alien species that the players can then encounter. Now, we've got a new series coming up in 2026, which I'm really, really excited about. What will they bring to us in terms of giving us these eras of play? What are your thoughts about the different eras? Have I missed a critical thing that you're sitting there going, no, you've missed it? Put it in the comments down below. Remember, of course, to hit that bell button, because that'll alert you to whenever new videos are coming out. And the like button always, it makes me feel good on the inside. So it's, just do the thing. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I wish you and yours long life and happy gaming.